just in closing, let me say this. Glenn Beck has a book out right now that's #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, which I think probably just really takes off the New York Times. But in his latest book, Common Sense, which if you haven't read this, you should, because the book is not only his book in the front part of the book, but it is actually Thomas Paine's Common Sense in the back part of the book. Something else your kids probably have never read if they're currently in school. But in his latest book, Common Sense, there's a chapter called The Cancer of Progressivism. And Glenn Beck writes this. He says, remember, to us, slavery and tyranny are far-fetched concepts that history has righted. But to history, the far-fetched concept is the idea that men should be free. If you bury your head in the sand and believe that things will just get better on their own, that you will one day wake up and government will have decided to simply leave you alone, then you deserve to see your children wearing the chains of government servitude. Now, Sam Adams, the founding father, said it slightly differently. He said, if you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains sit lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that ye were our country. Kind of the same idea. The idea that we have to get off our duff and fight for what's ours. And I think that's what all you people are here today. And that's all I've got for you. Do we have time for a question or two? Frank?
Yeah.
We do? Yeah. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
We had a discussion earlier about the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
We're going to have to take important stuff. You enlightened me today about the time frame. Amendment 17 went into effect on April 8, 1913. Then I presume the following November was the first time people elected the Senate, correct?
Probably. I don't know what the election day was back then.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, just like y'all to know, we couldn't hear anything he said at all.
Okay, say the question as few words as you can so I can repeat it for you.
With regard to the House of Representatives, should be 10,000 up by now, according to the constitutional ratio of 1 to 30,000. We only have 435 because the law was passed the following March in 1914, signed by William Howard Taft, that limits us. It separates the population from the representation. So as the population's grown, we've lost their voice. Apparently, from what I've learned today, that is the direct result of the 17th Amendment being passed in April of 1913. The following November, for the first time, the people elected the Senate, because the Senate record shows that prior to that election, they were all against limiting the people's voices.
I can't give you an answer on that because I don't know. In fact, there's a lot of questions you could ask that I don't know. But no, 1913 was a really nasty year, and then it kind of reminds me of things that are going on right now, where just every single week we're being hit with something else that's going through the Congress. And a lot happened in 1913 that was just really nasty. Yes, sir?
Can you tell us what was it that prompted the passage of the amendment that changed the way that senators were elected? What brought that about?
From reading what I've read about the progressive movement, they simply did not want to be burdened with this whole notion of federalism or separation of powers. That they saw this as an obstacle to their social agenda. And the progressives, and that is a lot of people. A lot of people talk about FDR as being the first progressive. He was not. It was Teddy was the first progressive. Go back and read some of the things that Teddy was saying when he was running as the candidate for the Bull Moose Party. You know, when he came back and tried to run for president again. A lot of it is just really scary stuff. It's not. You know, I grew up, Teddy Roosevelt was one of my heroes, but that was only because I hadn't read all this stuff. Yes, sir?
To answer that guy's question,
there were basically two things. Corruption of senators, buying their seats, and stuff like that from state legislators, and also state legislators not being able to come together and fill the seats. Those were basically the two reasons they gave. Was corruption. Well, we still have corruption, and we still have probably filling seats, like we just recently had with one. So we haven't solved the problem, we just made it worse.
We've run over. One more question, right back there in the back. With the current Congress? No. No. And I mean, you have people sitting on the Supreme Court that believe in the Constitution as being a living document. You know, we really missed fighting a lot of battles that we should have jumped in on before now. But people probably didn't realize at the time what was going on, or it just seemed to be an incremental chink in the armor. But you know, when you hear politicians talking about making some change, like to the Second Amendment, you should get the guy on the phone and say, I can't seem to put my finger on that part of the Constitution that allows you to change our rights. Or when you know your presidential administration or your Congress or whomever, you know, what has Nancy Pelosi done nasty lately? Well, what hadn't she done nasty lately? But Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution describes all the powers of the legislative branch. And that's it. That's it. If it's not there, it's not their power. And the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution make that clear. The Constitution of the United States made it clear, we are not attempting to list every power you've got. The Bill of Rights doesn't attempt to do that. And the 9th Amendment makes that clear. The 10th Amendment says, if a power of the federal government is not listed in this document, then that means it's a power of the state government or the people. So it was unenumerated rights for the people, but enumerated powers for government. When I worked at the Cato Institute years ago, we had a Supreme Court justice come in one day to talk to a small group of us. And it was fascinating because he got into just a bare knuckles brawl with the guy that's the director of constitutional studies at Cato. And at one point, he was kind of irked at some of the things that the Cato guy had said. And he just threw up his hands and he said, you know, I have this bad habit of not protecting rights that are nowhere mentioned in the Constitution. All our rights aren't mentioned in the Constitution. But the director of constitutional studies at Cato came back at him and said, I don't know why that should be a problem for you, because you're constantly protecting powers of government that are nowhere mentioned in the Constitution. But it was really kind of a synopsis of the little battle we're fighting today. But we've got to stand firm. We can still win this. If we don't win this, we're all in a big mess. One of my personal heroes is an economist named Thomas Sowell. I saw Sowell interviewed on television recently, and they asked him, you know, where do you think this is going? And Sowell's answer was, fortunately, I'm in my 70s, and it's not going to matter much to me. But he says, I'm happy I'm not the generation of my children or my grandchildren. Bad news. Thank y'all very, very much for being here.